Okay. Good evening, councillors. Good evening to the management team and staff present here in the chamber, and good evening to all those joining us online as we go through the agenda for the October meeting of council. I should advise that, as per normal, the meeting is being not only screened live, or is it screened live, but also recorded, and those the recording will be available on council's website later in the week or as soon as possible. Our first order of business is the apologies, and we have apologies tonight from Councillor Wicks and Councillor Bordoff. Can we have a motion to reflect the granting of those apologies, please? Councillor Fiddler and Councillor Mead. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Mead. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried and those apologies are granted. Also note that Councillor Martin was previously granted a leave of absence for this meeting and she'll be absent as well. We have no urgent business as such. So our next agenda item, if I'm not mistaken, is public participation. Questions on, sorry, I am corrected. Now, I'm sorry, which is item number 4. My apologies to those listening and those present. Item number 4, I should know that by now, is confirmation of minutes, whereby we have the minutes from the ordinary meeting held on the 22nd of September 2025 with a recommendation that those minutes be taken as read and confirmed.
So moved.
We have a mover, Councillor Fiddler, thank you, and Councillor Sims is seconder. Councillor Fiddler.
Accurate and correct record, thank you.
Councillor Sims. Any questions relating to the accuracy of those minutes? No, if not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Now, I'm hoping it's item number 9. Public participation, questions on those from the public, whereby we have questions from Mr James Redgrave and responses there for council's information. The recommendation is that council, in relation to the questions on those received from James Redgrave, endorse the responses proposed and authorise their release. Do we have a mover and seconder to that effect, please, councillors?
So moved.
Councillor Fiddler in fine form tonight. Councillor Sims as seconder. No debate. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Normally we would have public participation questions about those from the floor. We have nobody present in the chamber with us, so we'll bypass that agenda item this evening. Next agenda item is agenda item 11, where, in accordance with clause 29(1) of the Local Government Meeting Procedures and Regulations 2025, I, as chairperson, advise that council will now act as a planning authority. In that capacity, councillors, we will consider 11.1, which is a development application for 210 Wesley Vale Road, Wesley Vale, a proposed vehicle storage yard. Report author is Caleb Borg, our statutory planning officer, who joins us tonight. Our recommendation is for approval with conditions, I believe. And do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Sims, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Sims, I assume you're happy to hand over to our statutory planner?
I will, planning officer. Thank you.
Caleb, a very detailed report, a lot of information and a lot of discretions invoked. 7, if I'm not mistaken. We're in your hands.
Good afternoon. So again, we have an application here for a proposed vehicle storage yard. The application is for 2 to 4 vehicles throughout most of the year, with a total of 10 during busier times of the year. You can see there that's where the vehicles are to be stored behind an existing fence on the site, which we can get the better. Sorry, there's a bit more detailed site plans. So you can see there where that blue line is from the boundaries of the site is where the storage is occurring. You've got it 55 metres from that southern boundary, 20 from the front, 42 from the northern, and I believe that's 91 from the western boundary there. And as shown on the land there, on the classification of the land, it's identified as Class 4, which is identified as prime agricultural land. And given the size of the block, it wouldn't be suitable for a primary industry to occur anyway, as it is constrained to size and what the adjoining uses are. So on that eastern block, you've got a lifestyle block with a single dwelling and associated outbuilding development. And then on the block south, I believe it's just a small herd of cattle that's ran on that block with no sort of intensive primary industry occurring. And then you've got Frankfurt Road to the north and Port I think it is, to the east. As you can see there, it is in quite a centralised location to Devonport, Latrobe and Port Sorel, and has immediate access to Frankfurt Road. So if there are any sort of, requirement to remove vehicles from roads, that would be in a good location to get out there quickly and remove vehicles from both roads. Obviously, Port Sorel Road, there's only one real road that goes into Port Sorel, so it would probably be handy to have something in close proximity to Port Sorel Road in case there is an accident. Having a look at the state growth information in terms of vehicle movement stuff in the area, you've got 6,000 on Port Sorel Road, and that also includes 2,200 on Frankfurt. Obviously, with being in close proximity to Frankfurt, we have many other places nearby that would be able to service Frankfurt Road quickly. Obviously, it goes all the way through to Launceston, and I'm not sure what the traffic impacts are on that road, but obviously them being close to that as well would assist in sort of allowing traffic movements and that sort of thing if any accidents were to occur. So there were a lot of discretions invoked. The storage use is a discretionary use within the zone when not associated with a permitted qualification. So generally with your permitted uses within the zone, they do relate back to a primary industry. So you've got things like contractor's yard, freezing, cooling storage, grain storage, liquid solid glass fuel storage, and wood yards. They're all identified, but however, they're storing vehicles on this site. That's why the discretion wasn't invoked. And obviously, given that it is a discretionary use, it invokes all the other discretions, which is the application is required to demonstrate that there is no impact on adjoining uses, there's no loss of agricultural land, are they required to locate there for operational reasons, and is it appropriate for that location as well. So then we've got the parking code requirements as well. I believe off the top of my head, they were required to have 100 parking spaces, and due to that, they're required to have motorcycle parking spaces as well. Given that it is a storage use, you would assume that informal parking is likely to occur. As part of the conditions, I have said that has to be contained to that fenced off area. So obviously having access to the site being restricted, obviously to the employees, obviously they can manage that within the site. It is confined to about 10 for car. And from my understanding, it's in most cases from going out to the site and speaking to the applicant is that in some cases they're not even taking them off the trucks. They're just left on there, and then they would go out to say like the police station or wherever they may need to go the next day. But obviously they have applied for storage on a short-term basis. So, they might have vehicles there for 2 to 3 days, depending on how busy it is. And, obviously they would be coming and going from the site. My understanding is that the vehicle movements associated with it aren't going to be that high, because obviously you do have other tow truck companies in the area. And my understanding is that they operate, so the police will call out one towing company and then they'll kind of go in a circle to all the towing companies in the area, and then they'll cycle back. So you wouldn't expect them to be leaving constantly. So it is quite a small scale use for the zone. The concerns that were raised within the representation is that the use needs to be contained to an industrial area, which my response to that is that the rural zone does allow for quite a large number of uses, especially with discretionary pathways, and that's where obviously it needs to meet that specific discretionary use standards. So they were the points that I've said before. So the other point was decrease in property valuation, which the planning scheme doesn't have any consideration of. Environmental concerns. Speaking to the applicant, he did say most of the time when you've got contaminants and that sort of thing in crashes, usually they're left on the road where that crash occurs. However, we have included a funding condition from our environmental health officer in case there are potential causes of contaminants that may leak into the environment. You've got rubbish, boats, trucks, trailers, bikes on boundaries, another concern. I believe I've included a condition on there to say that the storage associated with this use is to be contained to that storage yard, which will hopefully reduce any sort of unnecessary storing of, wrecked vehicles and that sort of thing near a boundary. Obviously, if it's residential, there's not much we would be able to do in that regard. And you've got noise, which is also managed under MCA. Previous owner kept the property neat. Wasn't sure how to respond to that concern, as there's not been a planning scheme for that. Disappointed in council for considering the application. As a planning authority, we're required to accept all applications and assess them against the relevant standards within the planning scheme. And then the number of vehicles stored on the site is greater than 6. Well, they have applied for a maximum of 10 cars to be stored on the site, with obviously if they're supporting trucks and loaders and trailers. So I believe that was 216, I think, or 18 vehicles on the site. So yeah, we have a photo. Obviously, they've got a few cars in the front there. That's when I went out to site. All the cars were gone from that area. I did also take some photos of the vegetation, which I've forgotten to include in here, but they have planted some trees in that frontage area, which I have included a condition as well, just to say that has to be maintained and upkept, just to help screen any use on that site. And that's the next application there. So were there any questions in regards to any of the points here?
Starting with Councillor Sims, if we could, please.
The representation. It was mentioned about the vehicles, some vehicles parked over on the outer boundary to that representative's property. There has been a lot there. Is that a concern, or are they still there?
So
noticed them.
there were a few things stored. I believe the applicant has done quite a lot of work to clean up the site since the lodging of this application. So when I went out there were a few things that they still were intending to do in terms of cleaning up the site. But in terms of sort of what I've included as a condition on this is to say that they can't have any storage of materials associated with this use on that boundary. Now that would obviously be like, car parts or potential tires, that sort of thing, where, if it's looking like a scrap heap at the back, you would probably say that's not associated with a residential use. If they've got like some motorbikes that they may have and they just have them near the boundary, that's probably all right. But as long as they're not sort of storing, junk and that sort of thing near the boundary is probably where we would need to follow that up.
Our compliance team would have a number of opportunities to address those concerns, either through failure to abide by the conditions imposed if the application was approved, and also through the abatement process if that was applicable. Any more questions, Councillor Sims? Councillor Fiddler?
Just with regard to the hours of operation, so it says 8 AM to 6 PM.
Yep.
What happens if they get called during the night?
So my understanding is that the workers will take the trucks home with them. So they're not always kept on the site. So the employees will have their trucks on them. So if they have a call out, I think what happens is they go out, collect the vehicle, come back to their property, and then they'll come and put them on this storage yard if needed the next day.
Right, okay.
Thank you. Questions around the table? No? That would leave me. Okay. I do have some questions over for you. They relate to performance criteria 1 and 4. The other remaining criteria, the other 5 remaining, I understand the report. Clearly they've been addressed. So I appreciate that. But this is a difficult one for me, or for all of us, I'd suggest, in that the use is an approved use in all zones other than residential. So zone-wise, this could have gone anywhere. The business has operated for decades at alternative sites, and they've been viable. Otherwise, the business would not still be going. And I question that the reliance on that being a central location to infrastructure. That is the Frankfurt Highway, Bass Highway, Ports Royal Road. Clearly, in your presentation, you articulate that there are a number of towing providers. So this one's not the sole provider of towing services for that road infrastructure. And as I said, the service has been provided from alternative sites quite viably for a number of decades. It also, that's just a statement, I guess, there's no questions in that, obviously. It concerns me that the application is for storage of vehicles and not for contractors depot. So, reading between the lines, and some of this is subjective, of course, it would seem that maximum of five trucks, that is tow trucks, to be stored on site at any one time. People will take those trucks home when they're on call, they're rostered on call. So the call outs, and there's that centralisation issue, but the majority of the time, those outside the hours of 8 to 6 will be from the driver's home location, which takes away the advantage of having a so-called central site. Those drivers could live anywhere. Again, a statement more than a question, but it does draw into question the information provided to support P1 in particular. And that's my major concern. But I do have some particular questions, which I'll get to in due course. As I say, the transport depot one provides maybe more suitable, because if those vehicles are there during the day, those are the 5 trucks, that would suggest drivers will be there during the day. Either that, or they are called from their homes to the site to pick up a truck. So if the drivers are there and the vehicles are there, that's not simply storage of vehicles. That then becomes, to me, a contractor's depot or an operational business operating off that site. Is there, do you understand what I'm saying about that? It just doesn't seem that the information provided raises questions around the actual use being more than just a storage site.
Yeah. So I guess it is a very good statement and question, I guess. So the reason why the storage use was assigned to that is purely because they are storing vehicles on that site, whether it be sort of, damaged vehicles that they may be collecting, vehicles that they do use for the, for that use. And it may be, yes, that some people do take their trucks home, but, they may need to go past that property to pick up a trailer that they may need, or, something along those lines to assist them with a job elsewhere. Contract, like it being categorized as a contractor's yard, it's hard to say there's no sort of set definition within the planning scheme to identify a contractor's yard. I would think that with your contractors, you're more looking at sort of like if you provide sort of more services relating to, cutting down trees or something along those lines where you're going out.
We've had a number of examples of those.
Yeah, and you have staff kind of going out and in constantly, whereas you kind of, in this case, you've got people coming out, but, and that's not to say that obviously they've got trucks on the site, so there would be some level of vehicle movements from that site associated with, the employees on site. But you would have them going out, obviously, collecting vehicles, bringing them back and just leaving them there.
I understand.
And, transport depot, there's a lot of things that it could potentially be.
Yeah.
I believe that the storage use class was the best fit for it, because that's sort of the predominant thing is occurring on the site.
I get that.
Yeah.
I guess by way of questions, under P1, the assessment, it says quite right from the start, the application is required to demonstrate why a rural location is required for operational reasons. Now, given the information provided, both within the application and subsequent report, I don't believe that's been met. And as I say, it could have been in any other zone other than residential for a start. So there's no absolute need for it to be on our agricultural land. Likewise, when we have multiple tow truck operators, again, there's no absolute requirement for it to be on that site. And with all due respect, it seems to be, reading the information provided by you in that very detailed report, it suggests that the location is more about the ownership of the land than the actual requirement for it to be, operational requirement for it to be on that site. I don't believe, as I say, P1 has been met. The assessment criteria has been met. And unfortunately, I can't support it based on the information provided around P1 and that assessment's been done. That's been done. Having said that, that's a personal view and it's somewhat subjective, I would suggest. So again, that's what troubles me about the application. Much of it is subjective. When I say much of it, that's not fair. A component of it is subjective. As I said, the business has operated elsewhere quite successfully for decades. The other notes I made, again, around those call-outs and the average vehicle movements. Again, it's primarily around P1, although I will refer to P4. And it says the use and development of land for purposes of storage is permissible in all zones apart from residential, as I said. So again, it dilutes the requirement for it to be on agricultural land. And then secondly, from that particular performance criteria, I read they generally support those applications generally support a primary industry use, and you referred to that in your presentation, that this one doesn't, but typically they do. Again, cause for concern. And the application is for a storage yard and temporary storage of damaged vehicles on the site. Again, it's just, to me, inconsistent with the use and what is actually going to happen rather than what's been applied for. So they're my concerns. My vote will be determined by the P1 criteria and the assessment done against that. And as I say, that's unfortunate, but that's my subjective view of the assessment against that performance criteria. I don't know if other councillors have questions in relation to that or not. Happy to take more questions for Caleb before we put it to a vote. No? Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, is there a question? Deputy Mayor Mead.
I'm sorry, I was having a restart my computer. I couldn't ask earlier. So it was again around the need to be in this location for that business, which is what's being questioned, I suppose, when we're speaking about P1 as well. And it was something that we assessed another DA on recently in the last 12 months or so, is trying to get an understanding why that operation has to be on that site, which is not necessarily zoned appropriately.
Yeah, and I guess this is the thing about storage use is that it is quite a diverse use class, and it does encompass a whole variety of, different uses that can occur on land. And obviously, with the use class tables within each zone, is that they're tailored for a specific use. Now, the rural use doesn't necessarily restrict you to agricultural uses, and that's where you've got your discretionary pathway for that use to occur. The storage use isn't the only use that can occur on rural land through that discretionary pathway. Like obviously you've got your residential use, which you have to demonstrate, why it needs to be there. Obviously it's a completely different test, but we've got an application for this storage use, and that's not so that they could have a contractor's yard on there, and the difference is that it's not associated, or it's not easily identified as another storage use within that permitted qualification, which is why it's been identified as a discretionary use. And that's where you have that more rigorous test against the performance criteria. Now, obviously, in terms of sort of zones and that sort of thing that it could be appropriate for is probably where you're looking at sort of industrial uses, or industrial zones, sorry, where there is quite a restriction in terms of the availability of that land as well. Now, I think in terms of sort of what this use is, which is purely for storage of vehicles, it would be sort of, you have your general industrial zone, which would be more suited for more intensive industrial uses. Whereas if you have sort of just the storage of vehicles on that land, it may just be sort of wasted potential of what could occur on that land. And then you have you sort of, you know, where are these different industrial areas and what are their locations to different places and that sort of thing as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm not sure I'll actually, what was your question originally?
I suppose I'm just struggling with that, Kayla, and my apologies, because it requires a rural location for operational reasons, for example, and is compatible with agricultural use on ag land. This is rural, of course.
Yeah.
So I suppose I'd understand if it was a truck depot that was carrying farm produce for something like that, as opposed to this talks about storage of vehicles, which sounds like it's vehicles that have been broken down or some such.
And I guess that's also looking at the sort of the scale of what that use is, because I guess the alternative is that it's currently a lifestyle block, and you've got a relatively low intensity use. So obviously the applicant has indicated that throughout most of the year, you've got 2 to 4 vehicles that are probably going to be kept on the site, and with probably a maximum of 10 months when, you know, roads busier and that sort of thing as well. The operational reasons for requiring that location is that, you know, they have those trucks on site. If there's a crash, say on Portsrail Road, you know, I believe one of the employees lives on the site, so he's obviously able to jump in his truck and go straight out there if you know, if they need to get that removed as soon as possible. If that's where it's more coming from in terms of operational reasons. And that obviously, you know, being the primary way into Portsrail, you would have to go all the way through Moriarty and then go through that way. So obviously the faster they are able to clear that debris, you can allow traffic movements and that sort of thing as well. Yeah.
So I suppose as long as within, when you talk about the recommendations, that it's very clear that it's considered, from what I'm hearing from you, there's going to be minimal storage on site. The storage is only in between moving vehicles from one area to another.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a collection of a large amount of vehicle storage or truck storage.
Yeah.
It's just.
And this is what the owner has indicated to me as well. Obviously, it's not within the application, but in most instances, the cars won't even be taken off the truck because they'll go to the police station or, you know, somewhere else the next day anyway. But it is, I guess, still that temporary storage on that site that is occurring.
Thanks, Caleb.
That's right.
Anybody else? I think for the record, I'll just read the performance criteria for P1, which is the issue we seem to, I and Councillor Mead have with this application. And it's very clear. It's a use listed as discretionary, excluding in residential zoned areas, must require a rural location for operational reasons having regard to the nature, scale and intensity of the use, the importance or significance of the proposed use for the local community, whether the use supports or existing agricultural use, whether the use requires close proximity to infrastructure or natural resources, and finally, whether the use requires separation from other uses to minimise impacts. The key one in there is D. The others have been addressed in the report, but D is the one where the issue is.
Yeah.
And that there has been quite an amount of detail put into that one in the report.
And I'd like to reiterate that the performance criteria has regard to those specific points. It doesn't necessarily have to meet each of those. So that's where,
So,
yeah.
so thank you.
That's all right.
Sorry about the cross-examination. Okay, councillors, quite a bit to take in there, as members of a planning authority. Again, thank you, Cove, for the report, the presentation, and the effort that's gone into the application assessment. Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? We'll show of hands, please. That would be 2, 4. Those against, show of hands, please. That would be 4 against. That is councillors Sims, Freshney, Fiddler and Mead. The motion is lost. We will require a subsequent motion from the floor to reject the application, Jan, if I'm not mistaken, on the grounds that, as I suggested, that is 20.3.1, that is discretionary uses, P1, is deemed not to have been met. We have a mover and a second to that effect, please. Councillor Fiddler, thank you. Second, if we could. We have a seconder.
I'm having a second if it's not coming.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Mead. I'll ask the General Manager, before we vote, I'll ask the General Manager and Manager Jan if you have any concerns in relation to the wording of the motion.
No, if that's the councillor's reason for refusal, it can be expanded upon.
Happy? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And those against? So 1 against, that is Councillor Brown. That will be 4. The motion is therefore carried. Again, thank you to the team and Caleb in particular for the work undertaken. That was, a tough gig. Okay, next item, councillors, if I'm not mistaken, is 11.2, where we have before us a DA proposed 12-lot it's a planning scheme amendment as such for a DA that proposes a 12-lot subdivision out at Charles Street, Squeaking Point. The report author is Andrew Newton, our statutory planner. And Andrew, before we ask you to speak, I'd ask for a mover and a seconder with regard to the recommendations, if we could please.
Move for discussion.
I need a mover and a seconder in regards to the recommendations, if we could please. Thank you. Seconder?
Yep.
Councillor Fiddler, thank you. Councillor Dorniak, happy to hand over to Andrew to present. Thank you, Andrew.
As Mr Mayor pointed out, we have a combined planning scheme amendment and development application for 63 and 77 Charles Street at Squeaking Point. The location of these two sites are northern side of Charles Street, just before you get to the Port Sorell Conservation Area, and located to the east of the Mill Dam Road junction. Both sites are currently developed with single dwellings, each of those lots, and associated outbuildings. I'll move to the more zoomed in area just to get a little bit more of a closer look. So what we have is an application for a 12-lot subdivision of this land. Obviously just got the area underneath there, but now overlaying the lots over the top of that, proposing to subdivide the blocks to lot sizes between 1.2 hectares and 8,000 square metres. The reason for the planning scheme amendment is the land is currently zoned rural within D. Category D zoning has a minimum lot size of 10 hectares. Councillors, some of you may remember back to when we transitioned from our interim planning scheme to the state planning scheme provisions. Council argued that some of the land parcels that were at the time zoned rural resource, which was our predominant rural zoning that applied as the default rural zoning, that it wasn't appropriate to classify some of those land parcels to either rural or agriculture. We've got a bit of a flavour of what could be considered in the rural zone just before. And the agriculture zone is a lot more restrictive. And we successfully demonstrated at the Planning Commission that rural living D would be the most appropriate classification for a number of land parcels, including these two, subject to this application here at Squeaking Point. So the planning scheme amendment seeks to rezone the land from rural living category D to rural living A. And rural living A allows a minimum lot size of 1 hectare as an acceptable solution. At council's discretion, we can consider a minimum lot size to an absolute bare minimum of 8,000 square metres. Generally, as I say, generally, comfortably you can fit a contemporary sized dwelling, outbuilding, hazard management areas for your bushfire, and enough area for your wastewater systems and stormwater on a site around 1 hectare to 8,000 square metres. We know with some of the other legacy lots in that area especially, they're less than 8,000 square metres, can be a bit tight and there can be some challenges with management of water.
Andrew, before you go into more detail, this is the first time I've seen a combination DA and rezoning request.
Belfield was combined as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Just for the record and for me as well, the implications or the issues around the combination of those two in one decision.
In one, yep. I do have some slides in here if I skip through.
I'm happy to leave it if you've got it as part of your presentation.
So we have a bit of a flow chart from the Planning Commission here that talks about the process in itself. So an applicant can apply for a combined DA and rezoning application in the one go, in one process. It still very much follows a similar process to a planning scheme amendment, because again, the DA is very much reliant upon the rezoning going through, so they track as the one process.
Yeah.
So if
That's the key.
that's the key.
So if we were to approve, it still goes off to the Planning Commission for assessment,
Correct. That's
as the rezoning. If the rezoning were approved, then the DA, if it's approved tonight, would be deemed approved as well.
deemed approved. So where we are at the
Okay.
process with the flow chart is that we're pretty much at the top. Top point there is we're determining whether to initiate this amendment and we're considering the permit application as if that rezoning has taken effect. If the application is approved by councillors tonight, the next process, oh, there we go, there's my highlight, that's where we are on the top there. Next process is to then prepare and certify the amendment documents. You'll note that that's in the first attachment to the report. And then determine that permit application, and it then goes out to public exhibition. So it's at that point then we will then put that on public exhibition. If there are any representations or concerns during that exhibition period, it will come back to you councillors for consideration at that point. If there are no objections or concerns raised during that exhibition period, General Manager has delegation to certify the documents at that point, and it then proceeds to the Planning Commission for assessment. So that's in terms of the process, in terms of where we're at and what we're determining this evening. But before, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question, because it's good to have that context. But in terms of determining whether we do wish to prepare this amendment, it's important to look at not only the planning scheme requirements, which we are often familiar with in terms of subdivision developments, but also how it meets policies, our strategic plan and the regional land use strategy that applies for planning scheme amendments. The map I have on there on my screen is from our current 2008 strategic plan, and the site I've just circled there is highlighted in our structure plan from 2008, indicating this was an area for rural residential expansion. So it's within our radar. It's an area that we've identified in the past that rural residential development can be considered. One of the main considerations within the report, obviously there's a number of considerations, but one of the key ones which will no doubt be of interest to you councillors, but also for any of our public listening in this evening is in relation to stormwater management. Now, the subject site does sit on what I've often described around the office as a small little lump, which pretty much forms a very small ridgeline running through the site. Most of the site drains to the east towards the conservation area. Our infrastructure assets team have drawn up a little bit of a mock-up plan to show where the overland flow paths and where those drainage lines would go, noting that the fall is very slight. So it's not a significant fall, it's very marginal, so the water would very slowly drain predominantly in an easterly direction. So the properties at the end of Jasmine Drive, which are located in the northeastern corner of that photo, we know that from a stormwater perspective, there's often challenges in that area. This development in providing drainage along the northern boundary and then down the eastern boundary parallel to the conservation area would not only help to drain the development, but also provide a bit of relief to those existing rural res properties on Jasmine Drive. So hoping to alleviate some of the stormwater issues that are otherwise just sitting in natural environment at that point. And that water can be drained under Charles Street into a public drain, which then forms an outlet through the conservation area out to the estuary. And the photo that I've just highlighted there is at Charles Street, at the bottom corner, so to speak. And both myself and Infrastructure and Assets Department have had a look out there, and I'm confident that the solutions that we're looking at in terms of stormwater management can be achieved for this site. West, yes.
Well, while you're on the stormwater,
Yeah.
what about the wastewater? Is that area big enough to take those lots with all the effluent that's out? I was reading through the report, so it may need extra system or something like that because of the density of the land and the soil.
Okay. Yeah. So Geoton provided the wastewater stormwater assessment for the application. And they've stipulated within the report they are acutely aware that often through Squeaking Point, the water table is not too far below the surface. So often the primary treatment systems, which are normally dug into the ground, are not effective because they will get impacted by that, by the water table. So a secondary treatment system, which is often above ground in the form of absorption, in terms of covered absorption trenches on above ground, the more effective solution for these type of soil conditions. The secondary treatment systems also have the added advantage that they require less land area than your primary treatment systems. So Geoton have gone into a fair bit of detail within that assessment. They have noted, and this potentially, Councillor Sims may have been picked up on, some of the northwestern blocks may, and they highlighted in capitals bold, may be able to facilitate the primary system, but that would require further site investigation. But Geoton confident that secondary systems will be able to work given the site conditions here. So I'm very confident and take assurance based on the assessment that Geoton and the applicant have thus provided with the application, which leads in nicely to this point regarding the western edge of the site, predominantly in number 63. So there are two drainage lines that run through that portion of the site to the west of the existing dwelling, and they primarily drain Charles Street and one or two properties on Moorings Drive. And the water that drains on the western side of this ridge line that I just described actually drains further west under Milldam Road, around the back of Elfin Drive, all the way the long way out to the estuary, out almost near Panatana Rivulet. So the water drains very slowly coming through that area. You'll note there is an amended plan condition as part of the development permit that recommends, I'll bring up overlay and image here, that recommends that proposed lots 1 and 2 are consolidated and that we provide consent for only one lot in that location and one building envelope. Given the the stormwater considerations I described there before, and given also the location of where those natural drainage lines go, which are effectively small water courses in effect, having one lot in that location is going to be a lot more comfortable and more achievable than two. And you'll note on the plans that I've overlaid there, which is our internal drawings for overland flow paths, the bushfire hazard management plan and the subdivision plan, you can see that overlaid, and you can see how close and how tight things are for proposed lots 1 and 2 there. Otherwise, that brings me to the end of the presentation. A lot of documentation, as there always is, with any amendment, but obviously we also have the planning permit for consideration as well. So we'll welcome any questions or queries for consideration. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you firstly for the presentation and the information provided in the report and the assessment that's been done, Andrew. Very detailed as always. 22, I think, conditions recommended. I'm sure there'll be questions, starting with Councillor Gorniak. If you have any, we'll start with you and then go around the table.
I don't have any specific questions. Thank you for the slide showing the next steps in the process. Feel confident with that and what's already been discussed, and yeah, the joining of the lots. Yeah, so I don't have any specific questions.
You, Councillor Fiddler? A nod. Councillor Brown? No. Any other questions around the table?
I just wanted to ask, thank you,
Deputy
Andrew,
Mayor Mead.
to get some understanding around particularly the Natural Assets Code and the size of the lots. I think that's the biggest concern when you look at the lens that we have around that area with the natural bush assets, can't quite come up with the right word, as well as the bushfire zones, of course. That means a lot of that area will be cleared in the length of time on 8,000 square metre lots, which most of them are. Was there any consideration to try and change the lot sizes? I know you talked about 1 and 2, merging those into, I think, a 1,600 square metre lot. But I'm just curious, when you look at some of the issues we have with regard to the natural assets, as well as the water challenges that we deal with, and I understand a lot about the drainage, and I think that's actually some good outcomes. Thank you, with some of the explanations. But the lot sizes are a concern in that area.
Yeah. So in relation to the clearing, just trying to find the page explicitly where it mentions. So Scott Livingston Natural Resources did both the natural values assessment and the bushfire hazard assessment. So he's qualified as a practitioner as well as his field of expertise in environmental values. So certainly it's not a complete clear felling of the site, I'll make that clear. And all the blocks are assessed to BAL 19, which is your more mid-range in terms of bushfire risk. It's not BAL low or BAL 12, which is effectively clear felling everything, having no vegetation around. It's more that mid-range. So it gives that a fine balance between retaining some vegetation, but having sufficient low fuel managed vegetation around the building areas. So certainly the lots on the western side, 3, 4 and 5, note conditional Part 5 agreement requiring the building lots to be on the eastern side of the ridgeline, so they all drain to the east rather than exacerbating the issues to the west. So certainly that western side of the ridgeline, there's going to be no reason to clear the vegetation there because there'll be no building envelope or footprint on that side of the location.
So, Andrew, before going on to the rest of the answer from Deputy members, on that specific question, there's no reason to clear, as you say, because of the building footprint. But there's no guarantee the area won't be clear. Ironically, we're dealing with the clearing of an entire block in Jasmine Drive, which, as you said, backs onto this development right at this very moment. And again, the concern generally is that the retention of some level of vegetation, particularly in such a heavily wooded area of Squeaking Point. But there's no guarantees, there's no ability, I believe, for us to ensure that the blocks aren't clear-fell.
So, and that I think then leads into the second point
Yeah,
regarding
thank you.
vegetation to help provide a bit of context. So the natural value, natural values overlays that apply to our planning scheme largely pick up larger stands of native vegetation, which is picked up from area imagery. A lot of that data comes from state government. So the subject site has been modified in the past, so it's not, it doesn't have a very high natural value, if I can put it like that. And certainly the eastern part of the site does have a fair bit of radiata pine as well. So a lot of that would need to be cleared. And certainly from my looks around the periphery of the site, and certainly looking from the conservation area in, yeah, there's a fair bit of pine in there, and that would need to be cleared from a management perspective as well as a fire perspective. The natural values assessment looked through the site and identified, did not identify any threatened flora or fauna. Now, that in and of itself, so when we come under the planning scheme provisions, it looks at what it defines as priority vegetation, i.e. vegetation of high environmental value in terms of threatened species, threatened flora and fauna. There are things to protect, which has not been identified on this site. So that's from a planning scheme perspective. Now, obviously, we have a planning scheme amendment, and in that image that I showed before from our strategic plan that showed in purple the little plan that we've highlighted, it also had a green vegetation corridor connecting the Port Sorell Conservation Area to other areas of bush within the Port Sorell Squeaking Point locality, which was quite forward thinking at the time under the strategic plan. Fast forward 17 years, we're now in a position where we know a lot more in terms of bushfire risk and management. We also know a lot more about what typically happens with native vegetation and these type of conservation outcomes when it comes into private ownership versus what is managed either through conservation covenants or through public land. So some of the aspirational content from that original strategic plan is no longer practical, and it's no longer preferred in the current planning framework that we work under. Certainly, I'm definitely not recommending that we would pursue a dense vegetation buffer as what is described in our structure plan to go through this area of land that we have also identified as future rural residential land. It's not an outcome that's going to gel. But what obviously the bushfire report has indicated that a whole lot has not been. So there is some vegetation can remain. I'm pretty sure 27% clearing is what the value is at the top of my head. I'll bring that up while we have further questions. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But certainly in the recommendations, you note Part 5 agreement condition, and within that recommended Part 5 agreement in terms of the stormwater drain along the northern and eastern sides, mainly that stormwater drain is not going to be hindered by any structures or any development, especially fencing. So that in and of itself, if that stormwater corridor is kept clear of any obstructions, then that can also assist in terms of any wildlife that wish to transition from the conservation area to the west. They're not going to come across any fences or structures that's going to make it difficult for them to transition between the areas of bushland that do exist in that area. So I think from my perspective, that was looking at the intent. Yes, there's definitely the aspirational intent from the structure plan. Some of that, practically, we can't achieve that now. But there are some things that we can achieve. And certainly from reading through the assessment and bushfire report, it doesn't need a full clear fell of the site to facilitate that. So there was a lot in between that there, Deputy Mayor, so I do thank you for those questions, because certainly that was one thing I did omit to discuss on my initial conversation was about natural values and the bush, because that's certainly a key part of this consideration this evening.
What about the actual size of the blocks then, when we come to that? We talk about council's discretion to consider applications where the absolute minimum size is, I think, 8,000
Yep.
square metres.
Yep.
Where ideally in the zoning, it says a minimum of 1 hectare. So the majority of blocks are below the 1 hectare, obviously, above the 8,000.
Yep.
Your consideration of that aspect of the development application.
Yes, yep. So the planning scheme lists as an acceptable solution 1 hectare for subdivision. Yep. So that's a tick and flick. If it's 1 hectare or more, that's fine. It's sufficient area of 1 hectare to provide temporary dwelling development, manage all your wastewater, stormwater. Less than that, it's at council's discretion. And effectively, it's on the applicant to demonstrate to the planning authority that these lots can be developed and they can manage their wastewater and stormwater and can mitigate risk from natural hazards, a bushfire. And I'm comfortable, given the documentation that's before us this evening, that those lots can achieve those requirements. Now, obviously, when we look at a subdivision, this is obviously, how would I say that this is at an initial point in time. We don't have any applications for dwellings, as you know. We don't have any applications for large outbuildings. We don't have any applications as to where those wastewater areas are actually going to be on site in relation to those proposed buildings. The actual design that comes later down the track. Mm-hmm. And I know, councillors, that when we, the planners, myself included, when we do have inquiries from the public about purchasing a vacant block of rural residential land, we do give them an accurate planning advice to say, well, okay, it's not just going to a building designer and getting the building plans. There's a number of people you need to have a chat with. If they want to move their house away from that approved building envelope area that's on the plans that we have before us, they'll need to re-engage a bushfire hazard assessor. They'll need a wastewater consultant to design a wastewater system specifically designed for their house and the wastewater loadings from that house, whether it's 2, 3, 4 bedrooms or more. That varies the size of the wastewater system and where that would be best located. Same from a stormwater perspective as well. We have conditions of approval in this through the Part 5 agreement that would be registered on all the titles. That stormwater is to be detained on those properties to make sure that any outflows are no greater than what exists pre-development. So that will assist stormwater infrastructure that will be in place for the subdivision to ensure that the water doesn't all go in there all at once. They can gradually go into that system and gradually make its way out so it doesn't overwhelm the system. Certainly, a lot of the rural res development over the last 20 or so years, we've learnt a lot. And a lot of what we've learnt is coming through in terms of this assessment that's before you this evening as well. So in terms of that, and I'm thankful as well, councillors, with the state planning scheme as well, we do have an absolute bare minimum. We can't go less than 8,000 square metres. We used to consider less than that. And we know that sometimes it may not work in all those situations. So, and largely 8,000 square metres can work. But what the benefit with this process being a combined amendment, we get to take a deeper dive, deeper detail in relation to the on-site characteristics, which gives us a really good position to consider development in very clear detail. Yep.
Wow, extensive answers. I guess, Andrew, summarising my concerns, they reflect a previous application considered under the Latrobe Interim Planning Scheme 2013, where that we did consider less than 8,000 and ultimately rejected that application. But again, you've articulated the change very well under the TPS, so thank you very much for that. And that does somewhat alleviate my concerns. Deputy Mayor, any further questions? Councillors? No, if not. If that's the case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Again, Andrew, thank you for that extensive report and presentation. Yeah, you make it hard to ask questions sometimes by the extent of the detail, so it's a credit to you. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks to both our statutory planners for presentations tonight. Councillors, next item on our agenda is 11.3, where we move to cease to act as a planning authority. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Fiddler and Councillor Sims. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll now consider item 12.1, which is from the Department of Development Regulatory Services. It's the Building Department report for September 2025, where we have a recommendation, if I'm not mistaken, that the report be received. We have a mover and seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Sims and Councillor Gorniak. Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Steady with 29 applications, but I will ask a question through the chair with the application status report. I noticed that some they're pending from 2023. How long do they stay on the books for?
We might need to ask that question with the next agenda item, if we could, please.
Oh, okay.
With all due respect. No problem. Any queries or questions in relation to that agenda item? Nope. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. 12.2 is the Planning Development Application Status Report of September 2025. Recommendation is that report be received. I'll take, thank you, Councillor Sims, and seconded by Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Sims, now.
Ask that question about the.
Please do.
Yeah, the pending application from 2023. How long do they stay on the books for?
Through the chair, it's for 2 years, so those, depending on what time of the year they're submitted, they're probably coming up close to removal or expiry, yeah.
Thank you.
Is that 2 years absolutely, or they can apply for an extension?
No, the status is pending, waiting on the applicant to submit additional information. If that additional information isn't forthcoming, then 2 years is the.
Thank you for the clarity. Any other queries or questions? Councillor Fiddler, seconder, nothing? Nobody else? I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next, we've got from the Office of the General Manager, we have item 13.1, which is Latrobe Council Annual Plan, Q1 Progress Update, July to September. Do we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, which is the Council receive and note the 2025-26 Latrobe Council Annual Plan, Q1 Progress Update for the quarter July to September? Wow. Mover and seconder, if we could, please, councillors.
So moved.
Councillor Fiddler, thank you. And Councillor Gorniak, thank you. Councillor Fiddler.
Can we ask that Andrew, his report also makes comment, or?
Happy to. Looking for him. There he is there. Right in front of me. Andrew, if you wouldn't, mate, and before you start, it is an extensive report, detailed report. Really appreciate the time and effort that's gone into preparation of that.
Yes, basically the purpose of the report is to provide an update to councillors on progress to date on achieving the actions and objectives set out in the annual plan. In most cases, it's showing that recent progress has been made and on track. There's a couple of items highlighted where there may be some risk of potentially falling behind, but they've been flagged for monitoring and an updated report on next quarter. So I don't have too much else to add. Are there any specific questions about the report?
Okay. So Andrew's happy to take questions. If councillors have any around the table? No? No? Really appreciate that report. As I said, it's really helpful to get a picture, a snapshot of where we're at a given point in time. So again, I don't underestimate the work that's gone into it, so thank you.
It definitely was good to read and be aware of what's happening, so.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Fiddler. If that's the case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? That is carried. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 14.1, which is the finance report for 2025 and the September budget review. Again, report author is Andrew Cock, Team Leader of Finance. A lot of work again, Andrew. Can we have a move and second to reflect the recommendation, please? Councillor Fiddler and Councillor Sims. Councillor Fiddler, I'm assuming you might ask Andrew to speak to that.
Yes, thank you.
Andrew, if you would.
Yeah, good Chair. This report's a combination of the normal monthly finance report, but also the first quarter budget review. So that review is basically looking at mainly focusing on correction or updating carry forward estimates from the previous financial year, and also the impact of new information that's been received and decisions made during the first quarter, and in particular looking at the impact of some of the actual results for the year to date. So, as you mentioned, I've acknowledged the significant amount of work both from the finance team and the management team and budget owners on updating those budget forecasts to leading to the revised budget estimates that are provided. Just there in the summary of the impact, see that an increased estimated revenue, which is higher than the increased estimated expenses, but some of that revenue is actually to fund capital projects. So you see that the impact on the underlying result is a $152,000, almost $153,000 reduction in the underlying surplus for the year budget. That's the operating budget impacts. The capital budget impact, again, is mainly just identifying updates to the capital project carried forward from the previous financial year, but also, again, just some updates with new information that's come to light during this quarter. So yes, changes are highlighted in the document and also in the attachments. So I won't go through those individually, but again, after the questions.
Okay, around the room.
I have a detailed question.
Deputy Mayor
I
Mead.
was just curious, Andrew, under capital budget changes due to new information since the original, there's a retention payment from prior year curb and channel project. Just curious why retention payments are treated in this way.
I think the simple answer is it shouldn't have been. I think it's just been missed. So it should have been before the previous year, and it's just been overlooked. And the actual rejections become due, we realise what we need to correct.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Any other queries or questions? No, if not, put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. At 14.2, councillors, is the councillor allowances and expenses for the quarter ended September 2025. The detail is all there for transparency and information. Recommendation is that the report by Team Leader Finance concerning council allowances and expenses for the quarter ended September 2025 be received. Do we have a mover and seconder to reflect that? Thank you, Councillor Sims and Councillor Brown. Councillor Sims?
No comment on.
No. Happy? Councillors, questions? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? That motion is carried, and thank you. At 15.1, from the Infrastructure and Assets Department, we have fencing and contribution policy. The report author is with us tonight, Jonathan Magor, from the Manager of Infrastructure and Assets. Again, I think workshopped, if I'm not mistaken, with councillors, and a recommendation that the report by the Manager of Infrastructure and Assets concerning the fencing contribution policy be received. And council adopts the policy with immediate effect. Do we have a mover and seconder to that effect, please? Councillor Fiddler and Councillor Gorniak. Thank you. Councillor Fiddler?
Nothing further. Like you said, we've workshopped it. Don't have any issues with it.
Thank you. Councillor Gorniak? Thank you. Around the room. I should ask, offer, Jonathan, do you want to speak to that at all?
Just to highlight, this is an existing policy that's up for renewal, so it's nothing new, but it has been refined. I think it's clearer and it'd be more beneficial in the future. So, yeah, part of that review process. Thank you.
And that absolute clarity, obviously important. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for the work that's gone into it. If there are no other questions, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. At 15.2, from the same author, we have the dust seal policy, again, which I believe is an update. That again, the recommendation is the same as the previous motion. Do we have a mover and seconder, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Sims and Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Sims.
Well, Jonathan wants to report on the issue.
Mr Magor.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, similarly to the last one, this is an existing policy, but gave the staff the opportunity to make comment as well as through the workshop process. So a lot of this tidy up effectively comes through staff input, which has been great. Yeah, so the markup shown there for clarity, but yeah, should serve us well into the future.
Good. I appreciate the from staff with their experience and knowledge. Thank you.
Ask questions through the floor.
Yeah,
Before
Sims.
we got left of.
Plenty.
Plenty.
It's not necessarily an aspiration to seal all of our gravel roads either. So, yeah, some roads, yeah, unless it's got the traffic or the environmental issues, but just in healing, it is cheaper to make in the longer term to have a gravel road than a sealed road. But yeah, certainly high use, high traffic, high maintenance roads justify consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions or queries in relation to that policy? No, if not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. At 17.1, we have the council workshops. The recommendation is that information be received. We have a mover and seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Sims, and seconded by Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Sims, straightforward. Thank you, Councillor Fiddler. Any queries or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And those against? At 17.2, we have the delegates' report in relation to the work undertaken by the Deputy Mayor and myself. Recommendation is, I believe, that be received and noted. Do we have a mover and seconder to that effect, please? Councillor Fiddler, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Gorniak. Councillor Fiddler.
Just a thank you for the standing amount of work you both do on behalf of council.
Thank you. Feedback's appreciated. Any other queries, questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. At 17.3, we have the council decision status report for September. Again, recommendation that the September 2025 status report of open council meeting decisions be received. A mover and seconder to that effect, please. Thank you, Councillor Sims and Deputy Mayor Mead.
All there in the report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Mead.
Including a number that are closed out. So.
Yeah, always good to see. Queries or questions? Again, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried. At 17.4, we have the Port Surrey Community Information Evening Notes from the 9th of October. And recommendation that those notes be received. My comment prior to seeking a move and second was it was a very healthy meeting, well attended and well run by our team. So thank you for that. Very much appreciated. A mover and seconder, if we could, please. Deputy Mayor Mead and Councillor Fiddler. Deputy Mayor Mead.
I concur with your comments. It was a good meeting and it was quite informative by having Shane there from Taswater to give some insights into what's going on from a Taswater perspective, particularly in our area and the Greater Port Surrey area. So that was good, and I think we had about 45 or something there, which was reasonably well attended as well. So thank you for all the staff that came out to that meeting.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions in relation to that meeting? even the GM might like to comment. Seems he hasn't been given the opportunity so far this meeting.
No, again, just it was good to have a good representation from the community, some good questions, and the interaction. I think it was comforting again to get some of the information from Taswater, who presented on the price and services plan.
Yeah.
Which again is quite a lot of work that's going in. I know the community out of Port Sorell have had some concerns around sewage treatment and the environmental impacts of the beaches and surrounding areas. So it was good to get some information and share their concerns around the environmental impacts and non-compliance that they've experienced. So
yeah,
so it was good again just to have it from Taswater.
Yeah, it was a great initiative. It really was very much appreciated. For those who weren't there, a really good presentation and some detail provided, which would not otherwise be available to us. So, and hopefully Shane will be invited along to future meetings on a case-by-case basis. So,
yeah, and open to answering the questions from the community, which was good.
It's almost, I think, appropriate, given the agenda item, that we ask the GM to write to Taswater and thank them for the presentation and the attendance of Shane. As I say, I think it's more than applicable, more than appropriate that we thank them for the contribution made on the night, if that's okay.
Yeah, happy to do so.
Okay, having said that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. At 18.1, we have the Latrobe Council Audit Panel meeting held on the 9th of September. The minutes thereof and recommendation that they be received. A mover and a seconder, if we could, please. That'd be Deputy Mayor Mead and Councillor Fiddler. Deputy Mayor Mead.
I'll just check if anyone wants to speak to that in the room, but comment that we did have TAS Audit Office there, and as far as we're aware, everything is going well and on time. So thank you again for all the work that's gone on in the last 12 months to make sure that we're meeting those timeframes. Very much appreciated. It's a good meeting, and otherwise, if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you. Queries or questions, councillors? It's a long meeting by the sound of it, or by the content of the minutes, that's for sure. So again, thank you to the council members in particular, as well as those councillor members, Deputy Mayor Mead and Councillor Martin, for the work you're doing on our behalf, but also to the team, as the Deputy Mayor said, a lot of work, and it's good to see us up to speed in regards to that committee's work. Having said that, put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. At 18.2, we have the Canadian Latrobe Council's Joint Audit Panel meeting, which was held on the 19th of September as well. The recommendation is there for your information and consideration. Do we have a mover and seconder to reflect those recommendations? Deputy Mayor Mead, sorry, thank you. And Councillor Fiddler, thank you. Deputy Mayor Mead?
No further comments.
Okay, Councillor Fiddler? Around the room? Nope, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. At 18.3, the Latrobe Sport and Rec Management Committee meeting held on the 24th of September. That is the unconfirmed minutes of that meeting be received. We have a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Brown, thank you, and Councillor Fiddler, both of whom serve on that committee. Thank you. Starting with Councillor Brown. Straightforward. Happy to take questions. Thank you, Councillor Fiddler. Sorry?
Just to say that I'm there as chairman of this committee. I have now handed the chairmanship over of that committee to Councillor David Fiddle, who's taken it over. So,
With your support.
oh, absolutely with my support.
Yeah, it's a great transition, and thank you for your efforts in that space over a long period of time, Councillor Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Passion of yours. Thank you. Councillor Fiddler.
Likewise, I'd just like to thank Councillor Brown for his efforts and time on the committee as chair, and I look forward to the chance of becoming chair of that committee and receiving assistance from Councillor Brown. So thank you.
Thank you both. Anything else in relation to those minutes? Deputy Mayor Mead.
I also wanted to note Jason Sims, who's from my observation, put in an enormous amount of work, but also personal commitment to, particularly to our rec ground, Perkins Park, for sport in our community, and it's very much appreciated, and wish him all the best. Thank you very much to Councillor Brown for all the work that you've done, and looking forward to hearing about your new chairmanship. But I also wanted to note that Sassafras Cricket Club are mentioning there with regard to some challenges around facilities, particularly toilet facilities, which has been spoken about for quite some time, and it's received and noted. So at some stage, and I'm sure that we'll start looking at it from a council perspective moving forward, but it is something that's coming through and being noted in the minutes, which is good.
And it speaks to that precinct plan and the importance of that, where I expect and hope that issue around toilets in particular will be considered and prioritised, and even a suggestion around the transportable option that's included in the minutes. So the GM was going to comment before I took the opportunity. No. Do you want to add further?
Yes, I'd reiterate, we are working through the master plan with all of the stakeholders there over the course of this year. But I have engaged with the Sassafras Cricket Club to make sure that we can explore some options there, noting that they are having some issues with largely the toilet and change room areas. So Jonathan, Jono's team and are also just engaging just to see how we can support and work through that with them. So it is progressing. I know it's been a challenge, and we do it rightly so.
Thank you. Any other queries or questions in relation to those minutes? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. At 22, there's an opportunity for councillor questions without notice. No. Therefore, we will progress to 23, which is the closed meeting recommendation that the following items be discussed in closed session. They're listed there. Do we have a mover and seconder for that motion? Councillor Fiedler, thank you. Councillor Gorniak is the seconder. And I'm assuming everybody's in favour. I'll put the motion.
Aye.
And those against? Thank you. And that motion is carried. And we now move into closed session. Do we need that motion, please? We have it there. We already got it. Sarah, if you let us know when the